You're on, Tom.
Oh, let the incoherence begin. Am I really on? It is August 30th, 2020. Welcome to Dogs Without Cars. My name is Tom Cassidy. I got to Minneapolis in 1981, fleeing Mount St. Helens, and we were on our way to New Jersey. Hamel at that time was in a basket that we carried on the Amtrak. And we ran out of money right around here where I remained because we're still without benefit of cash. And among the first things I did here after contemplating suicide several times a day for many months, it's different here. You didn't invest in an ocean. You didn't buy a mountain. It's flat. And you're passive aggressive, which thankfully I've learned how to be as well. So I did get some benefit over these many years, 40 years now that I've been here. One of the first things I did is I got a job with the Whittier Globe, selling ads and writing an arts column in the Whittier neighborhood. And I tried to sell an ad at the Black Forest Inn. And I visited there one early afternoon, and I spoke with then, I guess, very young Erich Christ, who gave me a cup of coffee and was very nice to me and didn't buy an ad, and I had no idea that 20 or more years later it would become a significant part of my life to be connected there. And Erica, by the way, part of that family, is in a previous installment of Dogs Without Cabins. Years later, by fluke, I did a reading there for an experimental storytelling group, and I met a woman named Kay Kirsch, who was doing the series on Nicollet then. Richard, do you remember the name of that in that little coffee shop on the corner on Franklin and Nicollet? Verbose. And it was because of that I was exposed to or heard or got to meet a bunch of other spoken word artists. My initial meetings with them, and I do have to say this, were not fully pleasant, because it was made quite clear to me that were I to read the way I read, and even worse, read from the page, I can't remember my stuff, I read my poems, and that if I swore, I couldn't comfortably be part of their mix. Nonetheless, after filtering all of these different things, I slowly became friends with a number of these people, and years later, part of Cheap Theater, and it remains unclear to me how I became part of Cheap Theater, but it's currently comprised of Erica Christ, Richard Rousseau, and me. If there's a board, I suppose we're it. We don't have board meetings. We don't have minutes. Maybe we don't have a board. Nonetheless, we are Cheap Theater. And it's curious to me that as much as I like these people, because the sensibility about what it is to get up and tell a story or perform art or read a poem or broaden what the community could be of people actually expressing themselves with one another, to one another, without all those rules and regulations, we all agreed on that stuff. But it wasn't until 2 or 3 years of Cheap Theater and hearing Erica and hearing Richard that I really get to know them. And it's a remarkable testament, not just to the power of storytelling and spoken word, but personality. How carefully we try to craft that which we want to share with other people when writing a poem or an essay or a monologue or a story. And that's many years ago now. Richard is a good friend of mine. And he goes to wrestling with me. You don't get anything better than that, than somebody who will endure lowbrow, local, amateur, and very Shakespearean wrestling. First up, Richard Rousseau.
A visitor was asking me a question. I should say passenger, because I had been directed to treat every visitor to the Titanic exhibit as a passenger, just as I was directed to pretend that I was the captain of the Titanic. I was being asked about the defective rivets along the hull of the RMS Titanic. And since at 10 o'clock in the morning, on April the 14th, 1912, I had absolutely no knowledge of defective rivets, I was unable to answer. And so I pulled out my pocket watch, I looked at the passenger, And I said, "Let me assure you, everything here aboard the RMS Titanic is of the utmost quality." And the passenger looked at me and said, "Does that include your judgment, Captain?" I looked at my watch and I said, my, how time flies. "I'm needed on the bridge, excuse me." And I walked back to the stage door, which was along the side of the set, portraying the visitors' quarters. I opened it, walked through a backstage corridor to a real door, which I opened, and entered the hallway to the Science Museum of Minnesota, the staff area. I had been hired by the Science Museum of Minnesota to portray, as I said, the captain of the Titanic. I was among 12 other actors who were also portraying crew members aboard that ship. The exhibit lasted from June 2009 until February 2010. 9 straight months. I loved it. We had been given 3 months before to rehearse, being there on the spot, in the moment, ad-libbing, also researching the information. And finally, when we started in June, the most important rule was that we stay in whatever the moment was. It was always 10 o'clock in the morning on April the 14th, 1912, inside the area that depicted the passengers' quarters. In the area that depicted the grand staircase, it was always around noon. In the dining room, it was almost time for supper. In the boiler room, which was beyond that, the engines were racing, and it was somewhere around 9 o'clock at night. And then finally, in the iceberg room, it was just a little after midnight on April the 15th, 1912. And that was the place that I found that I wanted to be. For one thing, I could answer all of the questions that were presented to me. Questions like, why were we speeding? How come I didn't pay attention to the telegrams? Why was the ship sinking? If we had hit the iceberg head on, we would not be sinking. But instead we turned. And because we turned, we're going down. Get to the lifeboats! Beyond the iceberg room was the lifeboat room, where it was always 3 o'clock in the morning on April the 15th, 1912. And beyond that was the store, where, if you survived, you got to purchase memento after memento, celebrating your perilous journey and your experience with destiny. There was something about that room that was different than anywhere else. The people who occupied that room became fools. It was as if the parameters that make up rational thought just disintegrated. The most common question I got there in that room which, by the way, featured a large hunk of ice that had been created and refrigerated with a blue special shining on it. The rest of the room depicting a listing ship that was going down. And the most common question I would get as people stood there, the question they would ask was, is that iceberg real? Is that the real iceberg? And I would say, well, of course, it's as real as everything else that's here. There was a bench along the side of the listing wall that I found myself sitting on. And when I sat there, I would become perfectly still. And it wasn't as if as if I made a rational decision that it would be in keeping with the character to sit perfectly still. No, it was something other than that. It was something organic in the character itself. Sometimes I would stop breathing. Sometimes I was mistaken for a statue. Something in that character was taking over. And I would carry it home. It's true. You can ask my wife. I would be at the house and I'd be speaking in a British accent. And she'd look at me and she'd say, "Just who do you think you are, dear?" And it was a good question because I didn't know. Not entirely, at least. I mean, there was a part of me that had been taken. Part of me that just wanted to be in that room day after day after day. It got so that the staff was saying to me, "Perhaps you should spend a little more time in the dining room. You'd like it there. Wander into the passengers' quarters. You don't need to spend so much time in the iceberg room." But I just wanted to spend my time there. It was a difficult period for me. My best friend was dying. He was dying of cancer. I shouldn't say friend, I should say brother, because we were so much alike. He was good at some things, I was good at other things, but they were all the same things. And he was dying. And our parents, both my wife's parents and mine, all four of our parents, were moved out of their homes into facilities where they sat and they stared at clocks. More and more, I found that the people in that room were sharing in the pain. They were talking about losses of their own, and more I found myself listening. And sometimes it was the big losses, the ones that happened all together, the ones that we felt all at once, the Kennedy assassination, both assassinations, Martin Luther King's killing. There was a guy who said that he was there in Memphis at the time. And there was a woman that told me about 9/11. I was sitting on the bench, and I was still. I don't know if she thought I was a statue or not. But besides, there were kids in the room, and they'd been betting whether or not I was a statue. And so I thought it would be best just to sit there and not break the trance. And she was talking about how on 9/11, she landed at Newark Airport and then took the train out of there to Bridgeport, where she was to visit her sister. And as the train pulled out, it rounded a bend, and the entire city of Manhattan opened up. It was such a beautiful day. And she looked at her watch and looked back, and when she did, the first tower was hit. She did not talk about much other than that. Well, certainly not much about what happened on that day, but she talked instead about a dream, a reoccurrent dream that she kept having night after night after night. In the dream, she'd be on the train and she'd look at her watch. And she knew that if the watch stopped, then it wouldn't happen. But it kept moving night after night after night. She'd look at the watch and the watch would move. Look at the watch and the watch would move. And I cannot in any way depict how emotional she was at this point. It would be a violation to try to imitate her. But it got to the point where I couldn't take it anymore, and I turned and I looked at her and I said, "You can't stop time." And she screamed. She fell off the bench. And the kids, they're watching also, and they scream. 3 of them fall over, and I shout, "Get to the lifeboats!" And I reach down and I grab her hand and I pull her up. And she looks at me and she grabs me and she hugs me and she says, "I'm so glad you're alive." And I say, "I'm needed on the bridge." And I walk out through the boiler room, through the dining room, past the grand staircase, into the passengers' quarters, where two people shout, "Where's Rose? Where's Jack?" And I turn and I say, "I don't know any Rose and Jack. You can't expect me to know every single crew member's name." And I realize, oh, that's probably way too harsh. But I don't try to apologize. I just keep going through the set door, out the corridor, into the hallway, where I know they're going to come and get me. I've been told that I should be in the dining room, that I should stay away from the iceberg room. And here I've gone and I've done it. Security guards will be there any moment. But they don't come. Because all of the kids go into the store and they all buy captain's hats. And the woman, she gives me all kinds of praise. She stops every person that she sees that's working in the museum and tells them how wonderful I am. And she writes a letter to the president and it gets posted online. And I keep the job all the way through February. And I don't want it to stop. And on the last moment of the last day, I sit there on the bench and I watch the last passengers leave. I see the stage lights go out and the house lights come on. I see the iceberg wheeled out on casters. People with hammers take down the wall. And I know that behind me there is no longer a boiler room. There is no longer a dining room. There is no longer a grand staircase. There is no longer passengers' quarters. There is no longer a door in the set. The set is no longer there. Instead, there is a real door. But I sit there, not moving. And then a crew member comes over and looks at me and says, "I'm sorry, Captain. We have to strike the bench." And I say, I've still got my accent. "It's all right," I say. "You can't stop time." And I get up and I walk away. And that is the end of that.
Thank you, Richard. On a lighter note, I still think that we should form the Senior Wrestling Association.
Yes.
Where we never actually get off of the stool from the ring corners, but we just yell at one another. Yeah. "Don't you make me come over there. Yeah. I'll get you in a figure four leg lock. I can drop kick you." Thank you, Richard. I'm not sure of the year, but I'm guessing it was either 2009, 2011, 2006, 1824. I have no idea when I did the purchase of 15,640 paperback books from a guy who wanted to open a store in North Jersey, where I'm from, though there's no relevance to the fact that I purchased his collection of books, except that I'd seen the collection online, and there were roughly 100 of the pictures pictured. They showed about 1,000 of the covers, all 1930s through 1950s, lurid, paperback, sci-fi, Fu Manchu, skeletal hand lifting up phone, detective, tortured, Western, science fiction, Atlantis, early sci-fi, amazing stories type visuals, sleaze paperbacks, and Chain Gang Vicky, and Women of the Swamp, with these great painted lurid covers that to me were, when I was a kid, were the books, one, that you couldn't read or shouldn't read, and two, embodied everything that was alluring about the person you might become, which is somebody you don't want to know because you read all that stuff. But of course, in and among them were John Steinbeck novels and William Faulkner novels and Joseph Conrad novels, that to sell the paperbacks in the 40s and 50s, when small independent paperback publishers were trying to upstage what the literary and very moneyed Mad Ave type of world of publishing was trying to do by making you pay so much for a book, to popularize literature, they put that type of picture on top of bona fide classics. And there was some charm to that and some revelation to me that when I had been in junior high and high school and enjoyed reading Robert Bloch and reading Robert Heinlein and reading Faulkner's detective books, and the teacher would so easily and glibly dismiss them as a second-rate type of literature. Well, were you to look back now at what the Times best-selling books were then, you're going to see people you're not going to like up there. L. Ron Hubbard's up there. Great writer. Hate him for Scientology. Love him for being a great writer. But all of these many people had best-selling books that got rave reviews from the very institutions later generations would say vilified those books. Harper's, Saturday Review, New Yorker, they were great books. Publishers wrote didn't like it. It's the sort of literature I've always liked. That pulpy feel to it all, the genuine story to it all, where you did not have to conform to the publisher's edicts to get your story published. And that's the real stuff, the good stuff. So I stupidly, I wasn't stupid. Yeah, it was stupid. I bought 15,640 books one time, came out on 3 pallets on a truck, and I had no place to put them, which is generally bad planning, but I had them in the space that is now Glam Doll Donuts, part of the Black Forest building. And it was in there that I stored them for nearly 11 months. And I'd go there after work, and I didn't know this. I'd be going through these old paperbacks, and they had that musty kind of smell, and it was thrilling to me. I thought, I could go through 1,000 a day, and it'd be fine. I get through like 3 books. And you're inhaling this stuff, and you would get this great psychedelic buzz. It was like being high. It was just extraordinary. And I later learned from Jeff Rathermill, then working at Minnesota Center for Book Arts, that I was poisoning myself, that a number of archivists had died from inhaling all those rat crap glue fumes, and I'm in the thick of it. It's like being an early collagist and just drinking rubber cement. I thought it was fine. I didn't know that. But that was a great year in my life. I don't know that it could ever be matched again. It was like having a hideaway far beyond any other type of hideaway, because it was mine and it was my stuff, and I could look at it at my pace. And had Dawn not reminded me that I had a job, I wouldn't have gone home late at night to get to work the next morning. So at the end of the job, I can go back down to the Black Forest, to Glam Doll Donuts, and go through the books. And it was there that one evening our next poet showed up, named Ted King. And he was interested in some of the books, and he seemed to know a little bit about literature, and I don't mean that critically. At the time, we did not know one another. I didn't know that you knew stuff. How do you know? People show up and they think right off the bat, because I did what I did, that you're crazy, meaning me, and I have to assume that everything is just being gratuitous and kind because I might lash out. And indeed I might. But I got to know Ted there because he had been attending a group that still exists and meets in the Black Forest, and we'll meet again when COVID's over, called the Minneapolis Writers Group. Is that the correct name?
Writers Workshop, Minneapolis Writers.
Yeah, the hell with them. And Ted always, we'd talk about writing, and Ted would always recommend I join his group. Well, you could probably guess I'm a group guy. My entire group is here right now. And the few people with whom, in the periphery, I do have a group to support me and sustain me and be kind to me when maybe they shouldn't, include Ted King, who has a great past that'll be covered in different episodes and poems, but he did his own series of readings called Tributary. And he currently, in South Minneapolis, has a wonderful museum on his garage wall of art found only in the alleys. And the charm of that to me is that the most accomplished works, just picked up in the alley, are just there. And the pieces that are the paint by numbered pieces that are really there's two of them, kind of suck are the only ones that are professionally framed. That tells you something about art and ego, does it not? Next up, good friend, Ted King.
Thank you, Tom. And I'm glad you told that whole story because it gave me a break between me and Richard. I was really worried about having to follow him because that story of his was just so strong. I thought, oh, no, nobody's going to want to hear this now. But, oh, well, we'll try it anyway. All I do is write poems, so here's one called On the Beach in Rio. You know, I remember absolutely clearly you and me at sunset on the beach in Rio. I remember that. Or was that you and me? Maybe it was you and someone else. Is this your memory or is this my memory? I've never been to Rio. Have I? Yet, I remember. Do you remember? Remind me, did we ever stand together on the beach at sunset anywhere? I mean, someone must have been on a beach somewhere at sunset. Was it us? I'm not sure this is actually my memory. Maybe it's someone else's memory. You know, like a memory fragment that's just floating by and I grabbed it. Maybe that's it. Are you even listening? I mean, I need you to hear this. I need you to be hearing me. I'm trying to share a memory with you. What difference does it make whose memory it is? Now, I forget. A second. Was that you on the beach? And was that Rio? No, I've never been to Rio. Hey, maybe it was Lake Superior. You know, the North Shore. Yeah, that was, or wait, better. It was that creek, that little creek. Remember that? When I was a kid, I used to ride my bike out there early in the morning. It was like 5 or 6 miles. I'd carry a cane pole and some worms in a bucket, and I'd fish for crappies. I'd always catch a few, bring them home. Me and Mom would clean them. She'd fry them up. Yeah, it was probably that little creek that I'm thinking of. But that was morning. It wasn't sunset. And you weren't there. You know, I'm not sure I was there either. Might have been my brother. I'll ask him. It doesn't matter. I remember you, me, sunset, the beach, Rio. That was a poem. Here's another poem. I wrote this ages ago, and I'd kind of forgotten about it and I realized actually that it was kind of my statement poem, hokey though it may be. So here it is. It's called Close to the Cool. I wish I hadn't smoked and drank so much. And I wish I hadn't lost touch with old friends. I've wasted a lot of time and opportunities, and it's too late to make amends. I've made foolish choices, miscalculations about career and school, but you see, I've been driven by these inner voices that tell me I've got to get close to the cool. Yeah, I wear it on my sleeve like a metaphor unfurled. I've been chasing it cool all over the world. It's an itch. It's a calling. It's been my downfalling. But, man, I just love getting close to the cool. And I felt sorry for my wife because I spent my whole life trying to get close to the cool. I lost touch with my kids. They don't know what it is their dad does. They think I'm a fool. Well, I can't help none of that. Because I was born to be a cat that needs to be close to the cool. Because the cool can't be faked. The cool can't be bought. The cool knows what's true and it knows what is not. And the cool can't be captured because it transmutates. The cool sets its own terms. It's got savvy, guts, and grace. And the cool ain't for infidels. The cool is a sacred space. And I'm trying to get close to the cool. Now, the thing about cool is it finds its own place. Most folks can't see it when it's right in their face. It takes cool to know cool. And there ain't no cool school. And the media don't have a clue. Because the cool is quixotic. It's chimeric. It's elusive. But it's never redundant. And the few times I've touched it, I've felt so abundantly rich. Man, I love being close to the cool. And the cool is temporal. When it's gone, it's gone. You find something cool, you better go grab on. There ain't no going back to see where it's at because the cool has packed up and moved on. I've always been grateful for people who don't think I'm too weird. People that can dig what I'm doing because, I've always feared being alone in this quest. The pay ain't the best. And I'll probably spend the rest of my life trying to get close to the cool.
Thank you, Ted. And thank you, Hamill Griffin-Cassidy, for taping and post-producing this program, Dogs Without Cabins. And thank you, Ted and Richard. I'd like to close with a short poem I wrote, I think, about 15 years ago, when I was still able to write, damn it. I haven't been able to write since March. Yet I've written 50 pieces that are all missing that critical line. The one that nails it to your heart. I got it all there, but that line, the line that just drives it right in.
All I have is those lines. I don't have
You just, yeah, I just need the nails. This is called Shopping with Godzilla. And if you're a fan of old Japanese, mostly 50s, 60s horror movies, Godzilla movies, you might remember Rodan and Mothra, who was my favorite, who had, what was it? And they had the Siamese twins, right? The little girls who controlled it. Maybe I'm wrong. Could have been something else. But that I love that movie. Shopping with Godzilla. The real Godzilla, just 15 feet tall, maybe 8.5 tons before a breakfast of 900 Egg McMuffins and a counterboy, is a good neo-prehistoric guy who likes to window shop at the mall. In fact, he spends most of his millions repairing the damage he does when he peers into Victoria's Secret and his tail starts wagging. Or when I tell him a joke and his snort torches the Harry and David wagon into fondue. He's not allowed in any stores since the Gap burned down, and he's banned from riding the escalators because he's been spotted going up the down one once too often. He told the security guards it was someone else, but apparently they recognized the Hello Kitty tattoo on his third back plate. Nor is he allowed in the mall on Tuesdays, which are advertised as Godzilla-free. But he loves to window shop anyway. Imagine himself in Capri's. Look for mango-scented moisturizers. See if the sharper image robotic Godzilla has the right glint of wisdom in its glare. He tells me that he doesn't think trampling most people is such a big deal. And I tell him that I agree and that lots of people are lucky I'm not his size because they'd be flat out flat. And Godzilla snorts, and the Verizon Wireless people are suddenly hairless and pantless. Later, in the food court, we people watch. Godzilla drinking a dumpster-sized orange Julius blended with bananas and 2 sides of beef. I'm sipping rum from a flask because, let's face it, I'm with Godzilla. Who the hell is going to stop me? And we both comment how beautiful everyone is after all of them. He says it is true that beauty is only skin deep. And I tell him that that is one of the most often proclaimed but not really believed in truisms. And that it's easy for him to say because he's not bad looking for a clumsy pea-brain B-movie radiation baby. I mean, neo-prehistoric guy about town. And suddenly I feel dejected by commerce and 50% off banners and predatory stores like Abercrombie and Fitch, and not really believed in truisms, and my inability to attack Mothra, my inability to trample people, the rum running sorrow through my veins, and Godzilla tells me to stay put. He'll be right back. And when he returns a few minutes later, chomping on a clerk from the courtesy desk, he says, "Tom, close your eyes and put out your hands." So I do. And when I open them, there's a wind-up toy of me shooting sparks out of my mouth. Thank you.
Nice.
Hamill and Tom, thank you for including me in this.
Hey,
It's
looks
fun.
like that's good.
And it's a great project. I like it.
Hey, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Ted. Hey.
Thank you.
All right. Nicely done, everybody. Thanks.